In this video, we will look at the key differences in prokaryotic and eukaryotic transcription. We will expand on the major players of eukaryotic transcription. When we do this, I will also point out why RNA polymerase in eukaryotes are called 1, 2, and 3. And then we will move to describing some transcription factors and why they are called A, B, D, E, and so on. And in the end, I will touch a bit on RNA polymerase structure. But before we continue, I wanted to let you know that you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook for regular updates. I have links in the description. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do so that you don't miss out on any future videos. Okay, so let's get started and set up our basis first. According to the central dogma, the information flows from DNA to RNA, and finally to proteins if the RNA is coding. And transcription is the first step of the information transfer, that is from DNA to RNA. Let's start by looking at the differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic transcription. The first difference is in the intrinsic composition of the genome. The prokaryotic DNA is usually free of structural proteins, whereas if you look at the DNA in eukaryotes, it is bound by histones, and that is what we call chromatin. So what this means is that if you look at the DNA, it is wrapped around histones. And let's say your promoter is around this region, and now because it is bound by histones, it is not accessible anymore. And therefore, RNA polymerase cannot initiate transcription. So you need to disassemble the histones and make space for the transcription to occur. So what we are noticing here is that histones are naturally blocking the transcription or any enzymes that are trying to access the DNA. Therefore, you need some sort of remodeling of chromatin to remove this block and initiate transcription. And we will see these guys in detail when we talk about transcription initiation steps. The next thing I want to discuss is the players of eukaryotic transcription. And this is also the key second difference in the prokaryotic and eukaryotic transcription. The first major player we're going to look at is, of course, the RNA polymerase. In prokaryotes, we saw that the RNA polymerase, along with some specific form of sigma factor, gave rise to the holoenzyme, and that was capable of performing the transcription. In eukaryotes, however, the picture is different in that there are three major or essential types of RNA polymerases. These are named as RNA polymerase 1, RNA polymerase 2, and RNA polymerase 3. The differences among them comes from their specific function. The first polymerase is involved in the ribosomal RNA production exclusively, and ribosomal RNAs are non-coding, meaning that they do not code for any protein. The second polymerase is involved in the production of mRNA or messenger RNA, which happens to be the RNA that codes for proteins, and that will be the primary focus of our discussion on eukaryotic transcription in future. The third polymerase is primarily involved in some ribosomal RNA and transfer RNA, and also some small RNA production. Again, these are the non-coding RNAs, so they do not code for any proteins. Actually, there's a fourth type of RNA polymerase as well, and so far it has only been found in plants, and it is involved in some siRNA-like mechanisms. This last polymerase is considered to be non-essential, meaning that you can knock it out of a plant and the plant will survive. Now quickly, I would like to link this to the promoter structure of genes. We saw in the promoter video, the link is in the description if you want to check it out, that a typical eukaryotic gene consists of a mix of Tata box, BRE elements, initiator, DPE, MTE, and a couple more promoter elements. These are actually the elements that are recognized by RNA polymerase 2. On the other hand, what we did not discuss in that video is the small subset of genes where the promoters have elements like box C, box D, Tata box, and upstream control element. And this small subset of promoters is what is recognized by RNA polymerase 1 and 3. So the promoter structure is much more diverse in coding genes, and that is where messenger RNAs come from. On the other hand, the non-coding genes have a less diverse promoter organization and structure, and these would primarily be ribosomal RNA and transfer RNA. Related to this is the idea of distribution of RNA polymerases in a nucleus, and the RNA distribution as it relates to the transcription. So if you consider a cell's nucleus, inside you will find nucleoli, which, as you may know already, is the organelle where ribosomal RNA is produced. And therefore, the RNA polymerase 1 would be expected to be located at this particular location. And therefore, the remaining space in the nuclei is occupied by RNA polymerase 2 and 3. But this is actually in strong contrast to the amount of RNA in a cell. The steady-state quantification show that in a cell, about 90 to 95% of all RNA species is ribosomal RNA only. And the messenger RNA, which is exclusively produced by RNA polymerase 2, is only about 2%. And the remaining major subset is the transfer RNA, which is around 3 to 5%. These numbers are steady-state numbers, and therefore they can change given some external stimulus that a cell may experience. Now let's look at how these 3 RNA polymerases were named. The discovery of RNA polymerases involved some column purifications, where you have your extract bound to a column, and the way to elute them from the column is using some sort of salt solution. So you add some salt, and out comes some protein fraction. The researchers at that time used varying degrees of salt concentration. Starting with low salt concentration solution, out came the first fraction, and this was named RNA polymerase 1. And then they increased the concentration of salt a bit more, and out came the second fraction, and this was called RNA polymerase 2. And finally, at the highest salt concentration, they obtained the third fraction, and that was found to contain yet another polymerase, which was named RNA polymerase 3. So that's how the names of RNA polymerases have come to be. So if we continue on the theme of major players of eukaryotic transcription, we first have to realize that RNA polymerase in prokaryotes can bind to DNA, although it does so randomly, and then the sigma factor helps in proper positioning. But in eukaryotes, the RNA polymerase does not even randomly bind the DNA. Therefore, it requires additional factors for help, and these are called general transcription factors, or GTFs. These are called general because this particular subset is almost always required to help the RNA polymerase. And we've actually seen a couple of them in our promoter structure video. These are TF2B and TF2D. The function of GTFs is analogous to that of a sigma factor. So in eukaryotes, a bunch of GTFs will assemble at the promoter of the genes and recruit the respective RNA polymerase, which can then transcribe the message. Now let's understand the naming scheme of these GTFs. They always begin with TF, which stands for transcription factor, followed by a Roman numeral, which represents the type of RNA polymerase that the transcription factor is associated with. So here we have Roman numeral 2, meaning that it is specific to RNA polymerase 2. And this is followed by an alphabet. So you have A, B, D, E, and so on. So you get TF2A, TF2B, TF2D. Well, you get the point. So these will be the GTFs associated with RNA polymerase 2. Likewise, you can have TF1 plus some alphabet that will be specific to RNA polymerase 1. And you can have TF3 plus some alphabets, and that will be specific to RNA polymerase 3. Our general focus is always on RNA polymerase 2, and that's because it makes the messenger RNA. And therefore, RNA polymerase 2 associated GTFs will be our main focus. So let's understand where these alphabets A, B, D in the GTF naming come from. The answer, unsurprisingly, is similar to what we have already seen in the case of RNA polymerases. The researcher who discovered these GTFs took the nuclear extract and split it into 4 fractions, and these 4 fractions were named A, B, C, and D. And each fraction was eluted with a different eluate. So, from fraction A, one type of protein was obtained, and this was named TF2A. From fraction D came one protein, which was likewise named TF2D. Nothing came out of fraction B. But from fraction C, 4 proteins were recovered sequentially. And these were named TF2B, then D is already taken, and C cannot be used because it is a mix of 4 proteins. So they went with TF2E, and then came TF2F and TF2H. There are also TF2G and TF2J, but these are not always required. So when we talk about eukaryotic transcription, we will largely focus on these GTFs. Okay, so hopefully now you know why these transcription factors are named with alphabets. And now we've discussed how polymerase in eukaryotes is helped by some journal transcription factors. And now I think it is worthwhile to discuss how the structure of eukaryotic polymerase differs from prokaryotes. In prokaryotes, the RNA polymerase, as you may recall, is made up of 2 alpha subunits, 1 beta prime subunit, 1 beta subunit, and 1 omega subunit. But in eukaryotes, the RNA polymerase has about 26 subunits, so it is a lot more complex. But 2 of these 26 subunits look like the beta prime and the beta subunits of the prokaryotic RNA polymerase. The entire eukaryotic RNA polymerase weighs around 500 kilodaltons, and the beta prime-like subunit alone is about 200 kilodalton, which is the largest of all 26 subunits. And the second most biggest subunit is the beta-like subunit, which is around 100 kilodaltons. Importantly, the beta prime-like subunit in eukaryote consists of an important part of the RNA polymerase structure, and this is called the C-terminal domain. So if we draw out the eukaryotic RNA polymerase, you will have the beta prime-like subunit, and the beta-like subunit as the biggest one, and the tail of beta prime-like subunit is the C-terminal domain, which is a repeating structure of 7 amino acids. Somewhere over here, let's say, is the start of the C-terminal domain. So if we write the C-terminal domain from start as repeating unit, we have YSP-TSPS. And in humans, these 7 amino acids are repeated about 52 times. So the C-terminal domain is quite long. The alphabets here are single letter codes for amino acids. So Y stands for tyrosine, S for serine, P for proline, and T for threonine. We will see C-terminal domain in action in future when we discuss the mechanism of transcription. Finally, I wanted to add a few notes under the umbrella of regulation and gene structures. In prokaryotes, the genes are organized such that there is no interruption starting from +1 site and until the message ends at a particular signal. In eukaryotes, however, most of the times, the information within genes is interrupted. So you would have a message starting at +1, then perhaps a gap, and then another message, and you may continue like that until the end of the message. The part of the gene that are the message or the code for proteins are called exons, and the interrupting sequences that are not part of the coding region of the gene are called introns. So in eukaryotes, there is another step before the processing of RNA, which is to stitch various exons while removing the introns. And that can happen in multiple combinations, and this process is called splicing. A couple of other things that happen to the RNA in eukaryotes is the addition of a methylguanosine at the 5' end, and the process in which this happens is called 5' capping. And the tail end of the messenger RNA gets multiple adenines added to it, and this tailing process is called polyadenylation. And when we discuss transcription in eukaryotes in more detail, we will see why these are important. And that wraps up our discussion for this video.